Every country has its own money. But what if I told you that behind all the pesos, yen, and euros, there's really only one currency that calls the shots? This one currency. It's what funds wars. It's how the world's most critical resource, we're talking oil here, gets bought and sold. And if you lose access to it, well, your entire country can be cut off, just like that, pushed to the brink of collapse. Now, you might think this is all just about economics, but we're not talking about your everyday paper bills and coins here. No, we are talking about something much, much bigger. We're talking about pure, raw, geopolitical power. The kind of power that draws lines on a map and decides the fate of millions. And it all comes back to a single currency. So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? How did the money from just one country become the undisputed king of the globe? And maybe the most important question of all, could that ever change? All right, to really get this, we've got to jump in a time machine. Let's go all the way back to the end of World War II. You have to picture it. The world wasn't just a mess, it was completely and utterly broke. Okay, so just look at the situation back then. Europe, Asia, totally shattered. Their gold reserves, gone. But the United States? It was a completely different story. Its factories were untouched. The economy was just humming along. And here's the kicker. America held most of the world's gold. So when everyone was looking around, desperate for something, anything to build on, well, there was really only one place to turn. And so, with the whole world basically on its knees, a deal was made. A brand new system was literally built from the ashes of the old one. And its entire foundation, it was all built on American gold. This is where something called the Bretton Woods system comes into play. Back in 1944, all these world leaders got together. They had one huge goal: make sure the kind of economic meltdown that led to the war never, ever happens again. And their big idea? Let's build the entire global economy around the one currency that was still on its feet, the good old US dollar. And the deal they came up with was, well, it was almost ridiculously simple, but also kind of dangerous. Here's how it worked. The US promised that its dollar was backed by actual physical gold. Then every other country agreed to tie their money to the dollar. See what that does? It meant trusting the dollar was the same thing as trusting gold. It created this super stable, predictable system. And you know what? For a long, long time, it actually worked. But, and this is a huge but, that entire golden age was resting on one single promise. A promise that, in 1971, was just broken, out of nowhere. This, right here, was the moment the whole house of cards should have collapsed. Just look at this timeline. For almost 30 years, from 1944 on, things were great. The Bretton Woods deal fueled this massive global recovery, trade was booming, everything seemed to be going perfectly. And then, bam, 1971, the music just stopped. President Richard Nixon gets on TV and makes this absolutely jaw-dropping announcement. He basically says, yeah, that whole thing about exchanging dollars for gold, we're not doing that anymore. And just like that, with a single speech, the one promise holding up the entire world's financial system was gone. Now, logically speaking, this should have been game over for the dollar, right? I mean, a currency that's not backed by anything real should be worthless. It should have lost all credibility instantly, but it didn't. Which brings us to the absolute core mystery here. Why in the world didn't the dollar just collapse? Well, the answer is, the US had an ace up its sleeve. A kind of secret weapon. They were about to replace gold with something the world needed even more desperately. And that something was oil. And this is what became known as the petrodollar system. It's a bit complicated, but the core idea is simple. The US made these huge deals, especially with Saudi Arabia, to make sure that oil, the lifeblood of the entire global economy, could only be bought and sold using one currency, the US dollar. And check out this cycle it created. It's like a perfect, unbreakable loop. Think about it. Every country needs oil to run. To buy that oil, you have to have US dollars. So how do you get dollars? You either have to sell stuff to America, or you buy US debt, like their bonds. This created this permanent, artificial demand for the dollar all around the world, and it had zero to do with gold anymore. Suddenly, the dollar wasn't something you trusted, it was something you needed. And having something that the entire world is forced to use, well, that gives you a whole new kind of power. The dollar wasn't just money anymore. It had just become a weapon. I want you to think of it like a giant switch for the global economy. Because almost all international trade runs on US dollars, America basically has its hand on that switch. And for any country they don't like, they can just flip it off. That means they can block your trade, freeze your money, and basically throw your entire country into financial solitary confinement. This isn't just leverage, folks. It's a full-on financial chokehold. So you're probably asking, okay, why does the rest of the world just let this happen? Why not just use the euro or something else? And that is a great question. But the thing is, the system is so tangled up in everything now that getting out is, well, it's almost impossible. Almost all global trade is done in dollars. Most countries keep their savings in dollars. The entire plumbing of global finance is built on the dollar. Trying to rip it out now would risk a complete and total global economic meltdown. And that's really the uncomfortable truth at the heart of all this. Does the system give the US a massive, some would say unfair, advantage? Absolutely. But it also keeps things kind of stable and predictable. And in a world that feels pretty chaotic, that stability is a really, really powerful drug. So when you boil it all down, the dollar's insane power isn't really about the money itself. It's not about gold or even oil. You've probably heard that old saying, money doesn't rule the world, trust us. Well, after looking at all this, maybe we should change that a little. Maybe it's not trust, maybe it's dependence. The dollar is still king, not because everyone trusts it, but because right now, the world literally can't function without it.